same sex. You see the one on the yeah.
Little stream of consciousness again. I tell a story that there was I'm blocking again. You guys have a pretty strong hold on my senior moments. Okay, I'm blocking, but anyway, I'll tell you the story. It was Rabbi Michel, who was in his time, he was one of the Gedolei Ador, and from one of the Gedolei Apeisim, he had this amazing. He had an amazing mind. Rabbi Michel, they say about Rabbi Michel that he was capable of writing responsa, tshuvos, with both hands at the same time, two different questions, and answering somebody who was questioning him at the same time. He was a brilliant person. They said that he could go out and if you asked him how many leaves there were on a tree, he could look at the tree and tell you what it was. He just had this. He was a. He was runaway brilliant. There was one of the Chachmei Lublin, one of the students in Yeshiva, Rabbi Meir Shapira, was Rav Hirschsprung, who was ultimately ended up in Montreal. Rav Hirschsprung had a photographic memory. And the minute you walked in, you said to him, Shalom Aleichem, you said to you, what's your name? You told him your name, you said, what are you learning? That was his first question. And whatever you told him, so he started to comment on whatever it was. I was there, the Rebbe and I were there as scholars in residence many years ago, and there was a kiruv worker there by the name of Rabbi Merling. So as it turned out, his son was bar mitzvah that weekend that we were there. So on Sunday we went to daven at Rav Hirschsprung's minyan, and Rav Merling brought in his son to get a bracha from Rav Hirschsprung. So Rav Hirschsprung said to this. So there was a little crowd of people that gathered around. They wanted to hear the bracha that Rav Hirschsprung was going to give this bar mitzvah boy. So Rav Hirschsprung said to him, like, "What's your name?" So he said, "What are you learning?" So he said, "Malchus, Gemara Malchus." So he said to him, "Okay, say the Mishnah." It would have been me, I would have dropped into the ground or something. But this kid started to say the Mishnah by heart. The first one stopped him in the middle. He said, "No, it's not that way," and he continued to say the Mishnah he was quoting the Mishnah. So then he stopped and he said, "Okay." He said, "I'll say the Gemara." So this little boy started to say the Gemara by heart. And once again, Rabbi Hirschberg stopped. And so this repeated itself several times. This little kid didn't faze him. He just kept on going. And I finally stopped him. I tapped Rabbi Hirschberg and I said to him, Rabbi Hirschberg, this is not fair. So he looked up at me like, huh? So I said to him, you are reading from the text inside, and he's trying to say it by heart. Yeah. He had this photographic memory. I mean, by him, he was like looking at it. So everybody laughed, and he stopped bothering this little kid. The funny part of it is that about 2 months ago, a younger man came to Milwaukee as a candidate for the Kollel in Milwaukee, and he introduced himself as Merling. I said to him, are you from Montreal? He said, yes. I said to him, by any chance, was I at your bar mitzvah? He says, yeah. I said to him, do you remember what happened? He said, sure, I remember with you. It was you. This Rav Hirschsprung, when he was a bacher, came to Rav Chaim Ozer. And they were talking and learning, and a whole crowd of people came because this was Reb Chaim Ozer, who had this amazing command of everything. And here was this young Ilui from Yeshivas Chachmi Lublin, and they were talking. And then one of them quoted a Gemara and said it's on Daf such and such in Kesubis. And Reb Hirschsprung said, no, he said it was Daf Chavtes, and he said, no, Daf Chavches. So Reb Chaim Ozer said, Daf Chavtes. So he said, okay, I'm going to go to it. So he was going to get up to go get a Gemara. Reb Chaim Ozer was already an old man, and he was like lying in bed. So he got up to the Gemara. So he said, no, don't. So he said, what are you going to do? You're going to get a Gemara, so you're going to prove that an old man has a bad memory and doesn't remember. He said it doesn't pay. Anyway, they continued their discussion, and everybody left. Rabbi Hirschsprung went home and he looked it up and he found that Rabbi Chaim Ozer was right. And Rabbi Chaim Ozer didn't want to embarrass him. So he said, hey, what are you going to do? And he said, Rabbi Chaim Ozer met this Hasidic Gadol who had a reputation that he was a goyin in Nigla. So Chaim Ozer said to him, I hear that you're a great lamder. Could you tell me a Dvar Torah? Chassidim don't parade their lamdas. This is one of the things that they try to put somehow under the table. So anyway, so Rabbi Chaim Ozer insisted. So he told him a Dvar Torah, and Rabbi Chaim Ozer was nispoil. So he said to him, if that's the case, you say a Dvar Torah, then you're a Gavra Rabbi, you're a great man. So this Hasidic Gadol said, I'm not a Gavra Rabbi because of that. So Rabbi Chaim Ozer said, so what then is a Gavra Rabba? So he quoted a Gemara, I think it's a Gemara in Takin Malkus, that the Gemara says, how strange are these Bavloim that they stand up in the presence of a Sefer Torah, but they don't stand up in the presence of a Talmid Chacham. They don't stand up in the presence of a Gavra Rabba. So the Gemara says, what makes a Gavra Rabba? Why is the Gavra Rabba deserving the same treatment as they said? So the Gemara says, because the Torah says, Aboim Yarkenu, that it's 40 lashes, and Chachamim come along and they say 39. So you see that the Chachamim have a greater status, so you should be getting up for. So this Gadol said to Reb Chaim Ozer, he said, if they wanted to give an example, the Gemara wanted to give an example, and go give an example about Sfiras Ha'imach. The Torah says, Tisru Chamishim Yoim, and Chacham say it's only 49. So he says, because if it's 50 and you say 49, So God said, that's a nice piece of Torah. He said, but you don't get to be a Gava Rabbi. He said, you get to be a Gava Rabbi if you take away one lash, one klop from a Yid. It says 40, you're supposed to hit him 40 times, comes along, Gava Rabbi said, no, don't hit him 40 times. He said, that's what makes a Gava Rabbi. When you spare a Jew, you suit him. That's what's really. So Rabbi Chaim was even more nispoil. One of the things that's going on here is that in this account of Yankov's burial, Vayasu banov loy kain kasha tzivam, that they followed his instructions about the burial. And Rashi over here says, what does it mean? The Kovel Mokaim, that Yankov Avinu gave them instructions about how they were to carry his casket. Gimel and Mizrach, and each, there were to be three of his children in each direction. Ukisidron Lamasa, the same Seder that was ultimately going to be the way in which, when Jews would be in the desert, when Esau would be in the desert, how they would journey in the desert. And this was where the different degolim, the way each tribe had its own degel and its own place and its own group, this was established over here. Levi lo yisa. Levi was not going to carry, because he was supposed to destine, he was supposed to carry the Oren. Yosef lo yisa, shu melech. So those two were excluded. Menashe and Ephraim yutachteim. So Yaakov Avinu gave instructions that Menashe and Ephraim should replace Levi and Yosef. V'zehu ish al digleiv the oisais. That's why later on, when it describes the digolim, it says each person according to his flag. The oisais be'ois shemos alehem avim. According to the sign that their forefather gave them, lisa mitosai, to carry his mita. So, in a certain sense, Yankov Avinu was making a statement about the fact that Klal Yisrael were destined to have degolim, and that Levi, Yosef wasn't going to. He was a melech, and he was going to be replaced by his children, Menashe and Ephraim. But Levi was not supposed to carry because his tribe was ultimately supposed to carry the Oren. So now we have a little bit of a problem, because we know from what we just quoted that a person who's a great person has a chshivus which is equal to or better than the Torah. So Levi is supposed to carry the Aron with the luchais, and here Levi is excluded from carrying Yaakov Avinu.
The question seems to be against this Gemara about honey with the honey bavloim, but they said people would stand for a Torah but wouldn't stand for a Gava Rabba. So it seems to be against that idea.
Right. So why would Levi be excluded? We see just the opposite. Levi does carry the Aron with the luchas. Why shouldn't he? He should. Right.
Certainly, he should also
right.
carry his father.
So. One of the things about the Degolim and the Shvatim, and the fact that each one had their own flag and their own place and their own color, which corresponded to the color of the gem that was in the Choshen of the Kohen Gadol. is because each tribe really had its own, in a certain sense, its own genius, its own unique gift. And one of the primary functions of the Golim is that, in much the same sense that the Torah gives preference to, for example, if a Kohen Gadol passes on, the first preference, if he has a son who is worthy of the office, he would have priority over anybody else who would be equally qualified. And that's true of the Melucha, and it's true of the Rabbanus, and most offices, halachically, if there's a child who's qualified, he has preference over anybody else. So the practical part of that, I mean, without dealing with one of the others, but just the practical part of it is that there is really in a certain sense, a professional advantage that someone has if they've apprenticed. They've grown up in the presence of a Kohen Gadol. They know what the problems are, the challenges of being a Kohen Gadol are. If you've grown up, if you're a little kid and you grow up in the house of a rabbi, you know what the problems of being a rabbi are. You know that there's no time of the day or night which is safe. Everybody has, you're open fare for anybody, and you have to be available. That's the nature of the thing. Just like an emergency doctor has to be available. You can't. There's no such thing as not being available. It's the function of the office. So, and that's true about everything. And if the reason that, just on a practical basis, why a child of a certain profession should have priorities, because they know the work better than anybody else. They know the ins and outs and all the nuances of what has to be, what you have to be up to and what you have to offer. What?
It's not because of the blood. It's not a blood reason.
No, it's not a blood thing. No.
It's simply practical.
Right. It's a very practical thing. And one of the interesting things is that in the early generations of Hasidus, it didn't go over to the children. It went over to the most qualified office holder. So the Baal Shem Tov was succeeded by the Maggid of Mizrich. The Maggid of Mizrich was succeeded. I mean, he had many Talmidim, but really the era over there was the Rebbe Melech of Lezhensk. Rebbe Melech was the Rebbe of Rebbes in the next generation, and subsequently, and then probably a generation. What?
Didn't the people vote? Did the people vote
Didn't?
for the...
No, I don't think so.
Wasn't...
No, it wasn't. No. I mean, Chassidim voted with their feet. They did. If they didn't feel that the successor, that the son was the person that served their spiritual needs best, they went elsewhere. So it was they did vote, but it wasn't the formal vote.
And that changed when?
What?
Saying when that changed when? What was the...
It changed really in the generation after the Rebbe, the generation that succeeded Rebbe Michel. That next generation were already largely succeeded by their children. So it became I don't know what they call that. What do they call that?
Dynasty.
Huh?
A dynasty type of thing.
Yeah, a dynasty type of thing. And instead of a meritocracy, it was something else. I mean, it's not that their children, by and large, were worthy of that affiliation or that association. The generation afterwards, they were towering people, but there was a change. It did shift.
Was the Lubavitch Rebbe an exception in the 19th century? He succeeded his father-in-law.
Lubavitch was right from the get-go, where the Balatani was succeeded by the Mittler Rav. Mittler Rav was succeeded by his son-in-law. He didn't have either sons; he had daughters. He was succeeded by the Tzemach Tzedek. The Tzemach Tzedek was succeeded by his son, by the Marash. The Marash was succeeded by the Marshal. The Marshal was succeeded by the Rayatz, the Rebbe who came to America, and then it was the Rebbe. So that was always in the family. But it's pretty much around that time that
So
that started.
why, and the Misnagdim or the Litvaks or whatever it is, why are they so against this practice?
That what?
I mean, we see it today. We see
Oh, it's
Rosh
happening.
Yeshivas giving to their sons.
Right. So most yeshivas are family businesses. And in most cases, it's not so far from the truth. I mean, the children are usually pretty qualified. But so this whole thing with the Golim has many features to it. But one of the primary features is that it preserved the peculiar, unique genius of each Shevet, their particular talent, their particular gift to Klal Yisrael was it was supported by growing up in that context of an entire Shevet that fostered and to some extent educated that particular quality, or those qualities, whatever they were. So the gift of each Shevet was unique. Shevet Levi, if we talk about the fact each Shevet had its color, and it was not arbitrary. That color started in heaven in some spiritual way, but when it came into this world, it came into this world as a certain talent or certain quality of the Shevet, but it also came into the world in the form of a color. So it wasn't an arbitrary association, or like the gem color was not arbitrary to the thing. It was because when all things begin in the upper spheres, they begin as something which is an kind of an ineffable essence, and then when it moves into our physical world, it enters our world in different ways. It enters our world with certain physical qualities, with certain spiritual qualities, with certain emotional qualities, with certain gifts of personality, and as a certain color. So each Shevet had its color, but Levi did not have a color, because the color white is all colors. White is, when you see black, it's because whatever is black is absorbing all the light. Nothing is coming back to you. But when you see white, all the colors are coming back to you, and all the colors together are white. So the Kohen HaGadol goes into the Kodesh HaKadoshim to represent the Klal Yisrael. No colors. He goes in with white, because white is all colors. Shevet Levi carries the Aron with the Luchais, because the Torah is not directed at any one Shevet. It carries all colors. It's available to and addresses every individual. I mean, every one of us is supposed to look into the Torah and find ourselves in the Torah, in a certain sense, in our own configuration, our own spiritual uniqueness is something that is waiting for us in the Torah for us to go to it and take out what is going to help us grow. And it's got all the all the vitamins, all the proteins that are necessary for our spiritual disposition. So, but Shevet Levi is the Levi that doesn't have a color, because it's their business to be all colors. They're supposed to be white. But there's a danger, because the Shevet Levi, in a certain sense, had the least amount of people in the census, because the Aron was Mechala b'hem. The Aron, if people carried the Aron, and they were not worthy of carrying the Aron, so they
Weren't worthy.
Huh?
They weren't worthy.
They weren't worthy. They ended up as a casualty. So there's a danger in the fact that Neisei Ha'orein could, if people approached the Oren and they weren't worthy of carrying the Oren, so they, just like a Kohen who walks into the Kodesh HaKadoshim and is not worthy, they pull him out with a chain because he's.
There's a danger of not having a tafkid, like a specific color to work on. Is that the danger?
So the danger is when someone. Here's the problem. It's always the problem. The problem when someone looks into Torah, and instead of asking the question, what does the Torah tell me to do, goes to it with a prearranged, I'm looking for a kula. Well, not necessarily Kadam Lachtaboy. Kadam Lachtaboy would be the worst part of it, where he's really. But it's just someone who's, in the days when, in the early days, in the early 1950s, before, now you can get Cholav Yisrael everywhere. In America, you can get it almost everywhere. But there was a long time that you couldn't get Cholav Yisrael. When I moved back to Milwaukee, there was no availability of Cholav Yisrael in Milwaukee. On the East Coast it was available. It wasn't available in the Midwest. It wasn't in Chicago, and it wasn't in St. Louis or Minneapolis or Detroit. All of those. We didn't have that. And now, Baruch Hashem, we've had for many years, we've had Cholav Yisrael. But in the early days when I was there, I used to go out to a farm. And I would go out with a 5-gallon can and then stand there when they milked, and we, my father sometimes would want to spare me, and he would steal the can, and he would go out, and I would come out in the morning, and I'd leave the house, there would be a 5-gallon can of milk, and it was interesting, and when my father was niftar, so one of the people who came to pay a shiva call was the farmer.
He lost the business.
Did he bring the milk with him?
He didn't bring the milk with him, but he was grief-stricken. He was grieved. He said, your father used to come, he said, and he used to give me such good advice, and he was like, no. It would have been a year, it would have been easier. Then with Chol Yisrael.
Rabbi, can I ask a question? It's a bit convoluted, but it's convoluted in my mind because the lines aren't clear anymore. But it's on this Nakuda. I think it ends up with the question about Minhag Eretz Yisrael. And the early people that came from Europe, they fought bitterly against making a Minhag Eretz Yisrael. The way you're talking about that each Shevet had its tafkid, and that seems to have flowed down into Eretz Yisrael. And we've got so many groups of Yidden today, that everyone's trying to maintain their own identity. Those identities are not always defined on the most positive lines. This one's different from that one because that one does that one. And it's all become blurred. And where's the positive aspect of keeping minhag of Hussein as opposed to heading towards a minhag Eretz Yisrael and having one group of Yidden? This is what Yidden do.
Rabbi Yosef is very insistent that it should be battled by the Spartan, battle all their particular minhagim, and the Mechaber is the Mord Asr in Eretz Yisrael, and they should all these differences should disappear when people come.
Yeah, that was particularly the Europeans that fought, whether it was because of the seculars or because of the, I don't know what the Indian is, but I don't know anymore, whether the definitions that each group give themselves is such a schwach. Are they so different? Are they so positive that it's something that we should respect, first of all, or try to maintain? I don't know.
Can you give an example? Because I don't see it the way you do.
Not drinking milk on Pesach, made in
Morocco
Morocco.
doesn't drink
Can I go back for a minute, Ron? I want to go back to Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu gave a blessing for all his children. This blessing that he gave to us, to every individual Yid that would come therefore forever. So we're sitting here now. We are all blessed to such an extent that we're living here. We're living in the holiest land in the world, Eretz HaKodesh. We're amongst the holiest people in the world, Eretz HaKodesh. And we're learning, everybody in this room is learning more learning than they ever did in their lifetime because they're living here. Okay? There are differences, but I think the commonality is so holy that there is no negativity. It doesn't matter if this one eats kabrux or doesn't eat kabrux, or this one eats rice and this one doesn't eat rice. It's irrelevant. Because from Hashem's point of view, we are all pure, trying to do what we're trying to do to stay holy in our minds and in our lives and in what we do.
I don't think that was the Ron's question.
No, it's not the question.
The Ron's question was that we were it was a much larger world, I believe, 50 years ago.
What is it, much larger world 1,000 years ago?
But
And it's not true, by the way.
Really what I'm asking, and again, it's not necessarily, my question is not necessarily coming from a positive place, but having said that, it affects families on a day-to-day basis. We're not accepting that kid because his sister goes to that school or this, that. There are effects. It's not just it's romantic that we're all living there. It's true. It's all true. The question is, where are these dividing lines? There's a lot of hitpalgut, and I don't know where the lines are anymore.
Well, because you want control. Everybody wants control.
I'd like to represent something.
Yeah, good stuff, Rob.
Rabbi, one extra dimension in that, in the wrong question, I believe, is I find the pella that certain Meforshei HaTorah are considered, you could say, usher, outside, in the pale, not in our belt. The Meforshei HaTorah. That's the degree that it's reached already.
Oh, people stand up and call Rav Steinman a Russia. I mean, it's okay, fine. You could say it's a small group, but there's a pagam in the way there's a pagam.
Why can't they have their way?
They can have whatever they want. I don't control it. I'm just saying there's a pagam in the way we.
I think there's a pragmatic answer to this, and I'd like what the Rebbe has to say. There's diversity in halacha. I think that's what he's pointing out. So.
30 seconds left.
Well, we've got a stenographer at the end of the table. He won't let it down.
It's like the guy who's by the doctor, and the doctor says, "I have bad news for you." He says, "What did he?" He says, "You have 20 left to live." He said, 20 what? 20 years, 20 months, 19, 18, 17. So we got 20 seconds. Now, it's a big question. I think we should talk about it another time. It's a good question, actually. It's an important question. I don't know your name. What's your name?
Moshe.
Moshe. And so in one way, Moshe is very right, and yet in another way, it's very disturbing. It's disturbing and it's painful and it's unbecoming. You know, and we didn't invent it, by the way. We didn't invent strife. It's been going on for a long time.
We come out honestly, you say.
Yeah, we are. You know, we are. And Am KSY, we are a contentious people. And the bottom line I wanted to come to over here is that I think that perhaps one of the reasons that Yaakov excluded Levi was not because carrying the Aron of Yaakov was something less than carrying the Aron of the Torah, but because carrying the Aron of Yaakov was even more volatile and more sensitive than carrying the Torah. Just as the Aron of the Luchais was something that was devastating to someone who, you know, who had, when they were carrying the Aron might not have had the best machshava. Yaakov did not want to have Levi, whom he actually rebuked for his shortcomings. He didn't want to have Levi carrying the Aron so that Levi would not end up being a casualty of the. So I mean, amongst the many reasons why, relative to Rabbi Yitzchak's question over here, that these things are recorded because they are instructive. You know, so we have this aspect of the burial, which is supposed to be informing us about things that